Sometimes you don't have to be a genius to realize that some people are just being stupid. And that's literally red pen logic. I'm not saying he's a stupid person, I'm saying he's stupid sometimes. And I could tell this video is gonna be pure foolishness. It's either being what many people get wrong about doubting Thomas. Did we miss about doubting Thomas? Was he not doubting? Was he demanding evidence from Jesus? Was he demanding evidence to support his faith? Considering the fact that he has never witnessed someone, I don't know, raised from the dead after they die. Technically, he should have, right? The storyline doesn't even make sense. Technically, doubting Thomas should have seen that Jesus can raise someone from the dead. This is why I never get the entire fucking idea, and whatever you wanna call it, of Jesus, people around Jesus' time not believing Jesus is the Messiah. What? Are people coming in every 2 seconds and healing the dead? Healing the dead. Raising up the dead? Healing the sick? Is that something that happens constantly in the Old Testament? And I guess in the early stages, like 2,000 years ago? Or people just all around the world healing people miraculously? Is not the Messiah or somewhat a powerful being? I think that's an interesting thing to think about. But anyways, going to doubting Thomas. Doubting Thomas should have seen Jesus raise Lazarus from the dead, raise the little girl from the dead. These are things Thomas should have seen. So it's not really that much of a long, a long, I guess, lie at this point to say Jesus rose from the dead, because there've been examples in the Bible of this happening, of Jesus having the power to raise someone from the dead. It's a matter of, can he raise himself from the dead? But then you'd be like, I guess no, duh, he can. I'm ranting a little, but I would like to have you all think about why doubting Thomas even exists to begin with. What was the point? What's the point of having a doubting Thomas when Thomas have already witnessed the power of God? The power of God. Why would he doubt? See, I think this was never a thing to begin with. There was no doubting Thomas. This is just a story. It's a it's for people who doubt. It's for people with brains. It's for people who are skeptical of what they read and don't just believe it simply because it's written down. I try to point this out to the Mormon missionaries that came to my door like a few months ago, that there are few doubting Thomas in the Mormon, I guess, holy book. And it doesn't make sense that they even are there, except for the fact to scare everyone or to convince everyone that, oh look, there's a guy in the Bible that was doubting, and now he's convinced that God exists. He's convinced that Jesus did rose from the dead. That's my little two take on doubting Thomas before we even get into the video. Now let's see what we all got wrong about doubting Thomas.
Many people get this wrong about the account of doubting Thomas. Have a listen.
In John's Gospel,
He did not have an account. There was no book of doubting Thomas or book of Thomas. He did not really have an account. We know the story from anonymous writers saying there was a guy and he was doubting Jesus. And is one of his disciples. I think so. Yeah.
Thomas is with the disciples, and he says, "Until I touch his wounds and thrust my hand into his side, I will not believe." And then later Jesus appears to him and says, "Here I am, Thomas, come and touch me." At which point Thomas says, "My Lord and my God."
Yeah.
Well, we're never actually told that he touches the
Mhm.
wounds. And so I'm interested in your interpretation of the story, because there's a reading of this text, which is that, like, Thomas is saying, like, I need evidence,
Mhm.
show me the evidence. This is as soon as Jesus is there in front of him and says, well, if that's what you really want, go ahead. It's almost like he immediately realizes that it's a ridiculous request, or it wasn't needed anyway. It's almost a message of, like, the realization that it's not about the empirical evidence. Because otherwise I struggle to really get to grips with what the message of doubting Thomas could be. Because you're right to sort of, it's a
And this is how you know Alex O'Connor is a very intellectual person. The doubting Thomas story doesn't make any sense unless it's trying to convince us that it's unnecessary to even, like I've said already, to even doubt Jesus, to doubt his existence and his miracles. It's like in the Mormon Bible, the Book of Mormons, it has I think there were like three doubting Thomas. One was killed and one was made dumb. I didn't like the fact that they said dumb for someone that just couldn't speak. That's that's just so many baggage that comes with it. But anyways, they were like made as scapegoats because they were asking for evidence. And obviously, Joseph Smith tried to cover his ass here by saying, well, they were doubting, but they knew exactly that, God actually exists. Like Paul was saying, if you, oh, the people that don't believe in God are fools or whatever. So there's no point for a doubting Thomas, who technically already believed that Jesus did exist and he did a bunch of miracles, to exist if the only other miracle needed, in this case, Jesus rising from the dead, considering he already did it before. He already rose people from the dead. This is not some big jump. The story doesn't make sense.
an astute comparison to this Job thing. Here's somebody saying, like, hey, like, I want an answer here. And God, like, gives him something, at which point he's sort of brought to his knees. Like, what do you think is the message there? He says, you have believed because you've seen me. And bear in mind, seen, not touched. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. How are we supposed to read that as anything other than a message that, like, you should believe without evidence?
Please don't get me wrong. I think Cliff and Stuart Connectly do a masterful job in this conversation with Alex O'Connor. But there was one thing that I wish they'd added in responding to his question. Alex seems to think that the most natural reading of the account of doubting Thomas is to communicate the moral lesson to believe without evidence.
It seems like a perfectly natural reading to say that Jesus is there saying, yeah, like the best sort of approach to this is to believe without the empirical evidence.
But is this the most natural reading? I don't think so, and I think I can prove it.
Side notes, considering the fact that we're dealing with stubbornness to begin with, was Alex O'Connor better with a beard or with a mustache? I don't know, he had different phases, no beard, and then a mustache. I don't know. I think the beard phase was pretty nice. I don't know. Anyways, let's keep going.
You see, most people stop reading at verse 29, but the next two verses are crucial in understanding what Jesus meant and how evidence relates to belief. Jesus just finished
How do you know most people stop reading at verse 20? Jeez.
saying, blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Then John immediately comments, now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. When you read the whole context, it becomes clear that Jesus cannot be saying we should just believe without evidence. After all, John tells us in the next verse that he included this account of doubting Thomas so that we would read the account, the testimonial evidence, and believe in response. So unless we want to say that John is explicitly contradicting Jesus' words in the next sentence, then there must be another way to understand what Jesus is saying. And there is.
Maybe we actually are, considering the fact that there are many contradictions in the damn Bible. And I don't know why we're saying John, but let's just say John, the book of John, saying that Doubting Thomas exists for us to see that Jesus clearly is true. Doesn't really make that much sense. It doesn't add to the story. There's no moral to saying pointing out Doubting Thomas. It, I mean, you have to agree to this in some aspect. Why present a guy that was doubting Jesus' existence and then Jesus being waking up from the dead, whatever, after 3 days? And when Jesus showed himself, he didn't really touch the wound. When Jesus showed himself, as Alexa Corner pointed out, when Jesus showed himself to him, Jesus stated that you have seen, and that's an evidence or a witness for you. But it's even more blessed, more better, much more better for people not that have not seen and believe. How else can you take this? I guess I'm gonna give him a chance to explain this. But how else can you take a statement like that after presenting us a person that was doubting, saying why not just believe it all? I don't know, on faith. If there was, I'm convinced that if there was a religious text today, there would be more doubting Thomas than ever. In the New Testament, there was not much of a doubting Thomas. In the Book of Mormon, which was written like 200 years ago, there's few more. If there's a religious text coming out today, there would be a lot more doubting Thomas. Way much more.
Is. When Jesus says, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed," he isn't speaking metaphorically. He's not saying, "Blessed are those who have no evidence and yet believe." Rather, Jesus is talking about literal seeing. Jesus told Thomas, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." There are those who got to
So blessed are those who have not seen me and believe. So literal, not metaphorical. Blessed are those who have not seen me and believe in me. Okay.
literally see the risen Jesus and believe. But that's not the vast majority of people, and both Jesus and John know that. In fact, that's why John included the account of Thomas in his gospel. We don't get to
Oh yes, not the fact that he was doubting. And doubting Thomas. But let's try to understand his point here. He's saying the entire point of doubting Thomas is to say that, well, not everybody can see Jesus. Why not? Why not? If he helped doubting Thomas to become a stronger believer and know for sure that Jesus is the Son of God and is also God, why can't everybody see this? It's not like something is stopping Jesus from doing it.
literally see the evidence and believe. Instead, we get to read the evidence and believe. It's ironic that people pick
Which evidence are we reading? Which evidence are we reading? The problem here isn't that we're ignoring the evidence that we're reading. The problem here is that there is no evidence and we're believing just based on people saying it.
the story of doubting Thomas to show that evidence and belief are at odds, since John includes the story for one simple reason: to provide testimonial eyewitness evidence for belief. As John says,
Because John is Thomas. I don't get that. They said John was actually the one writing John. And he was writing how Thomas was doubting, and now Thomas isn't doubting anymore. That's not even a first person. Well, technically he is if he witnessed the event, but John is not Thomas. We're not actually getting John with Thomas' witness or testimony of what actually happened. We're getting it from John's perspective of an outside viewer who already believed that Jesus rose from the dead. Maybe he already God is evidence. But again, how can we ignore clearly what Jesus was saying and exactly what the story meant? Thomas was doubting. Jesus came, showed him himself, and that clearly shows, hey, I exist, I am me, I rose from the dead. Blessed are those who do not see, but still believe. But what's stopping Jesus from not showing himself to everyone? And what evidence are you talking about in terms of us reading it? Before the Bible was written, most of this were passed down through oral traditions. So they weren't seeing it, they weren't reading it, they were hearing it. And this is an important thing to pinpoint down. Reading something and hearing something does not make the thing true. He can consider the Bible to be evidence to support himself. If the Bible said Jesus rose from the dead, you have to look at outside sources to say whether this makes sense. If a group of people who believe in the same thing are writing more and more about the same thing that they believe, saying this is true, that's not supporting evidence. That's just the same thing. It just shows us a group of people actually believe this stuff.
These are written so that you would believe. By the way, Jesus does chastise Thomas for demanding a face to face encounter, literal seeing, before he'd believe. But that's not because Jesus is advocating for blind faith. No, he chastises.
No, he's advocating for us to believe through reading it, which is basically the same thing as not having a freaking evidence. Considering the fact that it's literally just a book saying I'm true.
Thomas because he should have believed based on the testimony of his friends who did have a face to face encounter with the risen Jesus.
What the heck should I cared about my friends being delusion? Like, that doesn't have any effect on me as an individual. They want to be delusional, well, that doesn't mean I have to be. So because Jesus was telling Thomas, well, you should have believed because your friends believe, your parents believe, entire community believe. So it clearly must be true. You should have just trust their words. Again, back to the entire fucking point. Doubting Thomas only exists to push people that are doubting to, I guess, not seek further evidence and just believe based on fucking faith. That's the moral of the story. You're literally arguing exactly what Alex O'Connor is pointing out. The entire point is to have doubting Thomas there saying don't seek evidence. You have enough. Your evidence is that your family, your friends believe in this shit. Or for me, that's not enough. It's because my family believes the earth is flat. Doesn't mean the earth is flat and I have to believe it.
This is consistent with the long ending of Mark, which reports that when Jesus appeared to his disciples, he rebuked them because they had not believed those who had seen him after he had risen. In other words, even though the disciples hadn't yet
So you rebuke the people that did not believe because they have not seen him. Again, you're literally supporting everything that Alex O'Connor is saying. Believing without seeing Jesus. Considering the fact that Jesus just rose up from the dead. Are we supposed to just believe that he rose from the dead because few people said they saw him? Hey, that doesn't make sense. Like, this is why I guess many atheists will point out that, well, after Elvis died, many people were saying they saw Elvis. Does that mean he actually rose up from the dead? Are we to believe it from just that point? And then Christians will argue away that, well, many people will put it on Elvis costume. Well, this and that. But that's exactly what Jesus is saying here. When you have a system set up where you have no way to combat false information and you just believe based on what my family members told me, you're going to have fucking issues. Like America has, with a bunch of people believing in bullshit ass conspiracy. So, yes, this is exactly what Jesus or the author is trying to say. This is exactly what the author is trying to convey. Believe because I wrote this motherfucking book. But I don't want to. I don't just want to believe because, oh, I'm reading it. I don't just want to believe because, oh, my family does. That doesn't make sense. That's not the best way to convey what's true. That's not the best way to come to a reasonable conclusion about literally almost everything.
Literally seen the risen Jesus with their own eyes, they still should have believed based on the eyewitness testimonial evidence. In a similar way,
By the way, at this point with Thomas, even let's go back, there were very few people that witnessed Jesus. We're talking, whichever account you want to say, it's like three people, two people that witnessed Jesus, and no, not really witnessed Jesus. They saw that the tombs was empty, and some went on to inform the others, and some did not. Different accounts, but you get my point. So there were actually very few people, very few eyewitness at this point to be like, oh yes, he rose from the dead. That literally contradicts literally everything that I know. But like I've also said, you could literally just make the Bible say whatever the fuck you want to make it say. You could also say it doesn't make sense that doubting Thomas is doubting, considering the fact that Jesus has done multiple miracles in his lifetime. So if doubting Thomas, someone that was a disciple of Jesus, was doubting, I think the author is he didn't realize that this story actually just makes the entire story fumbles. It fumbled the entire story, making it stupid. But if doubting Thomas, someone that was a follower of Jesus and saw all the miracles that he have done, did not believe or firsthand that Jesus rose from the dead, that says something. Where was he when Jesus was raising people from the dead? It doesn't make sense. And I don't think he has much more to say, so we're gonna stop it here. I already make this video way too long than it has to be. So that's basically it. Thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Have a lovely day, people.